The thunder rumbled across the Montana sky as Vanessa Wright stood at the edge of the swollen Yellowstone River, clutching her 6-month-old daughter Emma to her chest, her heart pounding with desperation. It was May of 1883, and what had begun as a simple journey to her sister's homestead had turned into a fight for survival when the spring storms unleashed their fury on the untamed wilderness. Vanessa's cotton dress clung to her slender frame, soaked through from the relentless downpour. Her chestnut hair had come loose from its pins, cascading down her back in wet tendrils. At 22, she had already endured more hardship than most women twice her age widowed when Emma was barely a month old, forced to leave their small farm in Missouri after drought had rendered the land worthless. "Hush now, little one," she whispered to her whimpering daughter, pulling the woolen blanket tighter around the infant. The bridge she had crossed just yesterday was now nothing but splintered wood being carried downstream by the churning waters. The normally placid river had transformed into a raging beast, swallowing the banks and anything unfortunate enough to be in its path. The sound of hoofbeats cutting through the rain made Vanessa turn. Through the gray curtain of water, she saw a rider approaching tall and broad-shouldered atop a magnificent chestnut stallion. He pulled the horse to a stop several yards away, dismounting with the fluid grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. "Madam," he called out, tipping his sodden hat, "you shouldn't be out here. River's rising fast." Vanessa clutched Emma tighter. "I need to cross. My sister's expecting me. She lives just beyond those hills." She gestured toward the distant landscape, barely visible through the storm. The man approached, and Vanessa could now see him clearly. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with a weathered face that spoke of days spent under the harsh western sun. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin, and a day's worth of stubble darkened his jaw. "Name's Wade Quinn," he said, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. "I ride for the Rockingham Ranch north of here." "Vanessa Wright," she replied, "and this is Emma." Wade's eyes softened as they fell on the baby. "There's no crossing here now, Mrs. Wright, not with that little one." "Miss," Vanessa corrected automatically. "My husband passed last winter." A flash of sympathy crossed Wade's features. "I'm sorry to hear that. But my point stands, you can't cross here. The nearest safe crossing is 20 miles downstream, and even that might be washed out by now." Emma began to cry in earnest, her tiny face scrunching up against the cold and wet. Vanessa tried to shield her from the rain, but it was a losing battle. Wade glanced at the sky, then back at the river. The water was rising visibly now, eating away at the spot where they stood. "We need to get to higher ground," he said urgently. "My camp's not far. You can wait out the storm there." Vanessa hesitated. Her sister Martha would be worried sick. But the cowboy was right, there was no crossing the river now, and Emma needed warmth and shelter. "Lead the way, Mr. Quinn," she finally said. Wade helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. With one arm around her waist to steady her and Emma, he guided the stallion away from the treacherous riverbank and into the shelter of the pines. His camp was modest, but well established, a small canvas tent beneath a rocky overhang that provided additional protection from the elements. A ring of stones contained the remnants of a fire, which Wade quickly rekindled, feeding it dry wood he had stored under a tarp. "It's not much," he said apologetically as the flames grew, casting a warm glow around them. "But it's dry." Vanessa sat close to the fire, unwrapping Emma from her damp blanket. "It's perfect, thank you." Wade busied himself with caring for his horse, removing the saddle and brushing down the animal's wet coat. When he returned, he carried a small pot and some provisions. "Coffee," he offered, setting the pot near the fire. Vanessa nodded gratefully. "I haven't had a proper cup in days." As Wade prepared the coffee, Vanessa studied him surreptitiously. There was a gentleness to his movements that belied his rugged appearance. He handled the delicate tin cups with the same care he'd shown when helping her onto his horse. "What brings you to these parts?" Wade asked, passing her a steaming cup. Vanessa took a sip before answering, savoring the rich bitterness. My sister Martha married a rancher last year. They have a small spread about 10 miles east of here. After my husband died, she insisted I come join them. Good to have family in these parts, Wade nodded. Too many folks out here with nobody to rely on. What about you? Vanessa asked. You mentioned the Rockingham. Wade's expression shifted slightly, a shadow passing over his features. Been riding for them 3 years now. Good outfit, fair boss. I was heading back from delivering a message to the railroad station when the storm hit. Emma had fallen asleep in Vanessa's arms, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Vanessa adjusted her position, trying to find a more comfortable way to hold her daughter. Here, Wade said, noticing her discomfort. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a clean shirt, folding it into a makeshift pillow. Lay her down on my bedroll. It's clean enough. Vanessa carefully placed Emma on the bedroll, tucking the shirt under her head. The baby stirred briefly before settling back into sleep. You're good with children, Vanessa observed. A flicker of something pain perhaps crossed Wade's face. Had a little sister once. Helped Ma raise her after Pa died. The way he said, had told Vanessa all she needed to know, and she didn't press further. They sat in companionable silence as the storm raged outside, the rain drumming against the canvas tent. Wade occasionally added wood to the fire, careful not to let it smoke too much in the confined space. Tomorrow, if the rain lets up, I'll help you get to your sister's place, Wade said. There's another crossing a few miles north. It's a bit of a detour, but it's higher up and might still be passable. You've already done so much, Vanessa protested. I couldn't ask for more, Wade shrugged. Not asking, I'm offering. Something in his quiet confidence reassured Vanessa. In the year since her husband Thomas had died, she'd learned to be wary of men offering help too often. They expected something in return. But Wade Quinn seemed different. As the evening wore on, they shared the simple meal. Wade prepared jerky softened in the coffee pot, along with some hardtack and dried apples. It was humble fare, but to Vanessa, who had been surviving on stale bread and cheese for the past 2 days, it tasted like a feast. Wade spoke little of himself, despite Vanessa's gentle questioning. She learned he was originally from Texas, had fought briefly in the tail end of the war, though he'd been barely more than a boy, and had been drifting north ever since, working cattle drives and taking ranch jobs where he could find them. And now, Vanessa asked, will you stay with the Rockingham? Wade stared into the fire. Been thinking it might be time to put down roots. A man can't ride the range forever. Vanessa nodded, understanding. She had seen that restlessness in Thomas when they first met, the desire to keep moving, to find something better over the next horizon. It had faded over time, replaced by contentment in their small farm and in each other. But then the drought came, and then the fever that took him, and Vanessa found herself uprooted once more. Emma woke crying, hungry and in need of changing. Wade tactfully stepped outside the tent despite the rain, giving Vanessa privacy. When he returned, his hat and shoulders glistening with water, Emma was fed and content again, gurgling happily in her mother's arms. She's got your eyes, Wade remarked, settling back by the fire. Vanessa smiled. That's what Thomas always said, but she has his chin stubborn like him. Good quality to have out here, Wade said. Stubbornness keeps folks going when sense says to quit. They talked until the fire burned low, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Vanessa spoke of her hope to eventually have a place of her own again, maybe a small house with a garden where Emma could grow up surrounded by beauty. Wade listened intently, his blue eyes reflecting the dying flames. When Vanessa finally yawned, unable to keep her eyes open any longer, Wade insisted she take the tent while he slept by the fire. I've spent more nights under the stars than under a roof, he assured her when she protested. One more won't hurt me. Vanessa was too exhausted to argue. She settled into the tent with Emma beside her, listening to the sound of Wade moving around the campsite, banking the fire for the night. She fell asleep to the rhythm of the rain and the distant rumble of thunder, feeling safer than she had in months. Morning brought a temporary reprieve from the rain, though dark clouds still hung low over the mountains. The river had risen even further overnight, transforming the valley below into a vast, muddy lake. Wade had coffee ready when Vanessa emerged from the tent, Emma babbling happily in her arms. "Doesn't look good," he said, nodding toward the flooded valley. "We should head north, try that other crossing I mentioned." They broke camp efficiently, Wade packing his belongings with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to life on the move. He fashioned a secure sling for Emma from a spare blanket, allowing Vanessa to carry her daughter close while keeping her hands free. The journey north was slow and arduous. The rain had turned the trail to mud, forcing them to pick their way carefully along higher ground. Wade led his horse, Copper, by the reins, the animal carrying their supplies and occasionally Vanessa when the terrain became too difficult. They had been traveling for perhaps 3 hours when they heard a low, ominous rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. Wade froze, head cocked to one side, listening. "Flash flood," he said grimly. "Coming down from the mountains." Vanessa clutched Emma tighter. "What do we do?" Wade scanned their surroundings, his expression tense. "We need to get to high ground. Now." He helped Vanessa onto Copper, then swung up behind her. With a sharp word and a kick, he sent the horse scrambling up the nearest slope. They had barely reached the top of a small rise when the flood hit a wall of water, mud, and debris surging down the narrow canyon they had just left. The force of it shook the ground beneath them. Copper danced nervously, and Wade steadied him with a firm hand and soothing words. Vanessa watched in horror as the path they had been following disappeared under the churning torrent. If they had been even minutes slower. "That was too close," Wade muttered, his arm tightening around her waist. They continued on, more cautiously now, aware of the deadly power of the water. By midday, they reached the northern crossing Wade had spoken of, only to find it, too, had been washed away. The river here was narrower but deeper, the current visibly strong as it carved new channels through the landscape. On the far bank, Vanessa could see the faint outline of a trail that would lead to her sister's ranch. "So close," she said softly, frustration evident in her voice. Wade dismounted, studying the river with a critical eye. "There's a spot upstream that might be fordable," he said after a moment. "It's risky, but I've crossed in high water before." "Is it safe?" Vanessa asked, looking down at Emma. Wade hesitated. "I won't lie to you, Miss Wright. It's dangerous, but staying here might be more so. That flood's changed the lay of the land, more could be coming." Vanessa considered their options. They could try to find another crossing, which might take days, or they could attempt to wait out the flood, which could be equally long and potentially more perilous if more water came down from the mountains. "I trust your judgment," she finally said. "If you think we can make it across, we'll try." Wade nodded, his expression solemn. "We'll need to be careful. I'll go first with the horse, test the depth, then I'll come back for you and Emma." "No," Vanessa shook her head firmly. "We stay together. If anything happened to you on the other side." Wade looked like he wanted to argue but recognized the determination in her eyes. "All right. Together then." They moved upstream to the spot. Wade had identified a wider section where the river seemed slightly calmer, though still dangerously swollen. Wade removed his boots and tied them to the saddle, then helped Vanessa do the same with her shoes. "Keep hold of the saddle horn," he instructed her as she mounted Copper. "If we get separated from the horse, make for the nearest bank, doesn't matter which one." Vanessa nodded, her throat too dry for words. She secured Emma in the sling across her chest, tucking the blanket around her to keep her as dry as possible. Wade took a deep breath, then led Copper into the water. The horse snorted nervously but followed his master's lead, stepping cautiously into the current. The water was ice cold, numbing Wade's feet and legs as he waded deeper. By the time they reached the middle of the river, it was up to his chest. and Copper was swimming, his powerful legs working to keep his head above water. That was when it happened. A massive tree trunk, uprooted by the flood, came hurtling downstream, hitting Copper with enough force to knock the horse sideways. Vanessa screamed as she felt herself slipping from the saddle. Wade lunged for her, catching her arm just as she fell. "I've got you," he shouted over the roar of the water. "Hold on to Emma." Vanessa clutched her daughter with one arm, the other gripping Wade's hand like a lifeline. The current tore at them, trying to pull them downstream. Copper had regained his footing and was fighting his way toward the far bank, but Wade and Vanessa were being swept away. In that moment, Wade made a decision. Letting go of Copper's reins, he pulled Vanessa to him. "Put both arms around Emma," he commanded. When she did, he swept her up, cradling both her and the baby against his chest. The river rose against its banks, the current growing stronger, but Wade planted his feet on the riverbed and pushed forward. Each step was a battle against the relentless force of the water. Vanessa could feel his muscles straining, hear his ragged breathing as he fought to keep them all alive. Emma, miraculously, remained quiet, as if sensing the gravity of their situation. Vanessa pressed her face against Wade's shoulder, praying silently for their survival. Wade's strength was extraordinary. Despite the powerful current, despite the numbing cold of the water, he kept moving, one agonizing step at a time. When the riverbed dropped suddenly beneath his feet, he didn't panic, he simply started swimming, using one powerful arm to propel them while the other held Vanessa and Emma securely. It seemed like hours, though it could only have been minutes, before Wade's feet found solid ground again. He staggered forward, his energy nearly spent until they reached the muddy bank. They collapsed together on the shore, gasping for breath. Copper had made it across as well and stood nearby, shaking water from his coat. "Emma," Vanessa gasped, frantically checking her daughter. The baby was wet but unharmed, her face scrunched in displeasure at the uncomfortable situation but otherwise fine. Vanessa looked up at Wade, who lay beside her, chest heaving with exertion. "You saved us," she whispered. "You could have let go, saved yourself." Wade shook his head weakly. "Never," he managed between breaths. They rested there on the riverbank until they had regained enough strength to continue. Their supplies were soaked, but most had remained tied to Copper's saddle. Wade built a small fire to dry their clothes and warm Emma, who had begun to shiver. As Vanessa held her daughter close to the flames, she watched Wade moving around the campsite, setting up a makeshift shelter from branches and his wet bedroll. There was something different about him now, or perhaps it was her perception that had changed. In the space of those terrifying moments in the river, he had become more than a kind stranger offering assistance. He had become someone she trusted with her life and, more importantly, with Emma's. "Your sister's place isn't far now," Wade said, settling beside her. "We should reach it by nightfall if you're up to traveling," Vanessa nodded. "I am. Martha will be beside herself with worry." Wade hesitated, then added softly, "Once you're safely there, I should head back to the Rocking M. They'll be wondering what happened to me." The thought of Wade leaving brought an unexpected pang to Vanessa's heart. "Of course," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You've done more than enough already." They rode double on Copper for the final leg of their journey, Wade in the saddle with Vanessa behind him, her arms around his waist and Emma secured between them. The land gradually transformed from rugged wilderness to more cultivated terrain. Fenced pastures appeared, then cultivated fields, and finally, as the sun began to set, the outline of a modest ranch house came into view. Martha burst from the house before they had even dismounted, running toward them with tears streaming down her face. "Vanessa, oh my God, we thought when the bridges washed out," she broke off, embracing her sister fiercely as soon as Vanessa slid from the horse. Martha's husband Daniel appeared in the doorway, relief evident on his weathered face. He approached more slowly, nodding respectfully to Wade. "We're mighty grateful to you, mister," he said, extending his hand. "When we heard about the flooding, we feared the worst." Wade dismounted, accepting the handshake, Wade Quinn, I'm just glad I was there to help. The reunion was emotional and chaotic, with Martha fussing over Emma and peppering Vanessa with questions about their journey. Through it all, Vanessa was acutely aware of Wade standing slightly apart, hat in hands, looking increasingly out of place. When Martha finally paused for breath, Vanessa introduced Wade properly, explaining how he had rescued them from the flood. Martha's eyes widened as Vanessa recounted their crossing of the river. "You must stay for dinner at least," Martha insisted, turning to Wade. "It's the least we can do." Wade looked hesitant. "I should be getting back." "Nonsense," Daniel interjected. "The roads won't be passable until tomorrow at the earliest. We have plenty of room in the barn and a hot meal waiting inside." Wade glanced at Vanessa, who gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Please stay," she said softly. He nodded, relenting. "Thank you kindly." Dinner was a simple but hearty affair: venison stew, fresh bread, and preserved peaches for dessert. Wade ate sparingly at first, clearly uncomfortable in the unfamiliar domestic setting, but gradually relaxed as Daniel engaged him in conversation about cattle and the surrounding ranches. "The rocking MTK's a good outfit," Daniel acknowledged. "Miles Morgan runs a tight ship, but he's fair. You planning to stay on with them?" Wade's eyes briefly met Vanessa's across the table. "Been thinking about making a change, actually. Might be time to settle somewhere." After dinner, while Martha gave Vanessa and Emma a tour of the small bedroom they would share, Daniel showed Wade to the barn where a clean pile of hay and fresh blankets awaited. "Used to be a bunkhouse," Daniel explained, "but we haven't hired any hands yet. Ranch isn't big enough to need them." Wade glanced around the well-maintained barn. "Looks like you're doing all right," Daniel nodded. "Getting by. Actually looking to expand soon. Bought the adjacent parcel from old man Jeffries last month. Going to need help breaking that land." He gave Wade an appraising look. "You ever consider working a smaller spread? Pay wouldn't match the big ranches, but you'd have a say in how things are run." Wade raised an eyebrow. "You offering me a job?" Daniel chuckled. "Maybe I am. Think about it. No rush to decide." After Daniel left, Wade sat on the edge of the makeshift bed, turning his hat in his hands. The offer was unexpected but not unwelcome. The thought of staying, of being near Vanessa and Emma, he shook his head, trying to clear it of such notions. He barely knew the woman. And she was still grieving her husband, still finding her way in a new life. The last thing she needed was a saddle tramp with romantic notions. Yet he couldn't forget the feeling of holding her and Emma in the river, the fierce protectiveness that had surged through him. It had awakened something he thought long buried, a yearning for connection, for family. The barn door creaked open, startling him from his thoughts. Vanessa stood in the doorway, a lantern in her hand casting a warm glow over her features. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said. "Emma's finally asleep, and I wanted to check if you had everything you needed." Wade stood, suddenly conscious of his damp, wrinkled clothes and unshaven face. "I'm fine, thank you. Your brother-in-law's been very hospitable." Vanessa stepped inside, closing the door against the evening chill. "Daniel mentioned he offered you work. News travels fast," Wade remarked with a small smile. "It's a small house," Vanessa replied, "and Martha's never been one to keep secrets." She paused, then added, "I hope you'll consider it. The offer, I mean." Wade studied her face in the lantern light. "Would that be all right with you, if I stayed?" Vanessa moved closer, setting the lantern on a nearby barrel. "More than all right." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Wade's heart hammered in his chest. "Vanessa, I don't want to presume. You saved our lives," she interrupted. "But it's more than gratitude I feel." Her eyes met his, steady and sure. "When you carried us across that river, I felt something I haven't felt since Thomas died. Safe, hopeful." She took a deep breath. "I know it's too soon to speak of such things. We barely know each other. But I'd like the chance to change that." Wade reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished. When she didn't, he gently took her hand in his. "I'd like that too." Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration of newfound feelings. When they parted, Vanessa's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with emotion. I should go back, she said reluctantly. Martha will wonder where I've gone. Wade nodded, releasing her hand. Good night, Vanessa, she smiled, picking up the lantern. Good night, Wade. In the weeks that followed, Wade became an integral part of the ranch. He accepted Daniel's offer, moving into a small cabin on the property that had once belonged to a previous owner. He worked from dawn till dusk, helping to clear and fence the new land, repair flood damage, and tend to the small herd of cattle Daniel had acquired. His relationship with Vanessa grew slowly, respectfully. They shared meals with Martha and Daniel, took walks in the evening with Emma, and gradually shared the stories of their lives. Wade told her about his childhood in Texas, about losing his parents and sister to cholera, about the years of drifting that followed. Vanessa spoke of her life with Thomas, their dreams for the future, and the devastating loss that had sent her seeking refuge with her sister. As spring turned to summer, Emma took her first steps in the yard outside Martha's house, toddling unsteadily toward Wade, who knelt with open arms to catch her. Vanessa watched, tears in her eyes, as her daughter squealed with delight when Wade swung her up into the air. She loves you, Vanessa said that evening as they sat on the porch, Emma asleep in her lap. Wade's hand found hers in the gathering darkness. I love her too, he said softly. Then, after a moment, I love you both, Vanessa. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Vanessa turned to him, her eyes shining in the moonlight. I love you too, she whispered. Their wedding was a simple affair in September of 1883, held in the yard of what would soon be their home, the cabin Wade had expanded over the summer, adding a second room for Emma and a proper porch where Vanessa could sit and watch the sunset. Martha wept openly as Daniel gave her sister away. Emma, now almost a year old, sat contentedly in Martha's arms, playing with the ribbons on her new dress. The local preacher, who rode circuit through the scattered homesteads and ranches, performed the ceremony. Wade wore a new shirt and his least worn pair of trousers. Vanessa had sewn herself a dress of pale blue cotton with lace she had ordered specially from the general store in town. I, Wade, take you, Vanessa, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Vanessa repeated the vows, her hand trembling slightly in his. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed her with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to her eyes. The celebration afterward was joyful, with neighbors from miles around coming to share in their happiness. There was music from a fiddle player who lived down the valley, dancing in the yard, and plenty of food prepared by Martha and the neighboring women. As evening fell, Wade and Vanessa stood together on their new porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Montana sky. Emma had fallen asleep hours earlier, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Happy? Wade asked, his arm around Vanessa's waist. She leaned her head against his shoulder. More than I ever thought possible again. He kissed her temple. When I found you by that river, I never imagined we'd end up here. I think perhaps we were meant to find each other, Vanessa said softly. The flood that nearly took our lives also brought us together. Wade nodded, thoughtful. Life's strange that way. The same river that rises against its banks can also lead you home. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the night deepen around them, secure in the knowledge that whatever floods might come, they would face them together. In the years that followed, their family grew. A son joined them in the summer of 1885, William Thomas Quinn, named for both his father and the father he would never know. A daughter followed 2 years later, Catherine Martha, who had her mother's eyes and her father's determined spirit. The ranch prospered under Daniel and Wade's joint management. They added more land, more cattle, built a larger house for Daniel and Martha, and eventually a proper schoolhouse that served all the children in the valley. Through it all, Wade and Vanessa remained each other's anchors, their love deepening with each passing season, each challenge overcome, each joy shared. And sometimes, when spring rains swelled the river, they would stand together on the bank, their children beside them, and Wade would tell the story of how he had carried their mother across the raging waters, with baby Emma clutched to his chest. "That was the day," he would always finish, looking at Vanessa with the same tenderness as when they first met, "that I found everything I never knew I was searching for." And Vanessa would squeeze his hand, grateful for the flood that had changed the course of their lives, bringing them together on the wild banks of a Montana river.